Right, so today we're going to talk about output and growth. So what we're talking about here is the GDP. The output, we mean the GDP, the production. You can measure output in three ways. You can measure the output or all expenditure or all the income, because obviously if I spend €1, it's somebody's income and somebody is selling me some of the output, so they will all equal. But normally we measure the GDP by measuring all the output together, all the goods and all the services produced by the private sector, by the market, but also by government and by the third sector. So yes, the output is the gross domestic product, the GDP. In Italian it's PIL. Okay, yeah, the definition is total value of all final goods and services produced by the factors of production. So the final goods and services. Not, we don't double count. We don't count, aluminium, produce aluminium that then goes into the car, and then so it's measured both as a value of aluminium and then the value of the car. No, we have to value the final product or final service. Okay, so you've got the output method or the income method, so that's measuring all the income, or the expenditure method, measuring all the expenditure. Now, real GDP is taking into account inflation. We know if we produce a coffee in 1970, it will be valued much cheaper because there's inflation. So in 1970, maybe the coffee cost 25 cents. It's in cents. But now maybe it costs $1.50. But that's the output stayed the same, so it's just an inflation in price. So the real GDP takes account of that. The real GDP is the real output, and if we're measuring it in euro, we've got to take off the inflation, so we really compare the output, not the including the inflation rates. So the nominal GDP is including the inflation rate. To be honest, academically honest, we need to take into account this inflation rate. Otherwise, we think our GDP's gone up a huge amount, but in actual fact, the inflation is huge and we haven't produced more. GDP per capita, this is per person. Okay, obviously, you've got big countries like China producing a lot more than small countries like Malta because they have less of a population. So to be really academically honest, they have to divide the population with the GDP. And so you see how much GDP is per capita, per person. And that will give you an idea of, how productive each person is in that population, or how much how well they're doing economically. Obviously, there's a huge difference between China and Malta, but per capita, maybe not. Each person might be richer. I mean, the biggest per capita in the world is Ireland. Obviously, the biggest GDP in the world is United States of America, but if it's per capita, it's Ireland. They're doing the best because they have a very small population, but they're able to produce the most value per person. Production possibility curve for an economy. Now, we can have consumer goods and capital goods on the axes, as it's done in the example, or maybe have just goods and services, or maybe public goods and private goods. You know, we can do it in many ways. But the point is, this is our frontier. The production possibility curve is the frontier of growth. So with the given factors of production, the given resources we have, in other words, we can only really achieve a point on this line, on this production possibility curve. There's not enough to produce more. And if we achieve less, if we have a point under the line, obviously we're not utilising all the resources. Maybe there's lots of unemployed people, or not all the factories are working, land is being left idle and not used, and offices closed and not rented. So, you know, this can, to have growth, economic growth. So economic growth is the increase in the GDP. And to have that, which is the objective of the government, the line will move to the right. Okay, here we can see if you invest in capital goods, maybe the country can actually shift the line to the right, and so achieve an increase in the growth, or some economic growth, an increase in the GDP, which is the objective. So somehow we desire to produce, to shift this line so we can actually produce more. A point outside the line on the right is impossible, and a point inside means we're wasting resources. Now, what is economic growth? So yeah, I just said it's an increase in the real GDP of an economy. So not the nominal GDP, which is including the inflation. So this means if the supply of goods and services increases in line with rising demand, because obviously if you're producing things that people don't want, you're not really increasing GDP, because it's a waste of time producing things that people aren't buying. But if it increases in line with rising demand, then they can be considered a growth in the economy, and they can be enjoyed. You've got more products and services out there without an increase in prices. Maybe wages will be going up, or maybe prices will be actually going down. But you know, there'll be more products and services available. So that's obviously the objective. Here we can see the GDP generally goes up towards an economic boom, or it can go down where you have a downturn, an economic downturn, and reach a crisis, you know, a recession. And then generally goes up again. So it's a cycle. It's a cycle. We obviously prefer, as I've said before, to have the GDP in a straight line without the oscillations, so there's not the problems like unemployment and inflation. But generally it goes up and down, and the underlying trend should be up. So generally it should point upwards. That's the objective. So how can we grow the economy? You could grow the economy, for example, discovering more natural resources. If we found some oil off Italy, suddenly we'd have a lot of oil, the price of oil would go down, and then production on other things would become cheaper, and then the products would be cheaper, and suddenly people are better off. Or maybe you discover other things. So a discovery of more natural resources could be a possibility of economic growth. maybe improving the investment in new infrastructure like TAV, the train link to France will give opportunities. So you could, you know, transport goods much quicker. Um, Maybe increases in the speed of communications, speed of the internet would help, be more productive, and so increase the production and delivery of services. Building bridges might help with delivering, help with the logistics to make the system more efficient, etc. Technical progress there's a lot of technical progress at the moment. Robots, for example, making cars. They can make cars much quicker and cheaper and without mistakes and don't need holiday, etc. So that could lead to economic growth. Suddenly, you can increase the GDP, or maybe AI could increase economic growth because people can learn languages easier, for example, and become much or more able to communicate internationally, and maybe more able to export or import, etc. So technological progress tends to increase GDP. Improving the quality of resources. Here we can see education. It's one thing having lots of people, but you really produce more when those people are able to produce more, and they have languages and they know economics, and they're skilled and competent and are able to do projects and think logically and have critical thinking and solve problems. So improving the quality of human resources is an objective of all governments in order to be able to produce more and then live better. So negative growth is recession or crisis, we often say in Italy. Here we can see in the picture lots of shops boarded up because they can't sell. And there will be lots of unemployment, there'll be very low wages and not much money around. So people have lower standards of living. So this is a situation to be avoided, which we use economic science to try to avoid this situation. Here, the crisis is when the line goes down. So it's when GDP goes downwards. If it goes downwards a certain amount for a certain length of time, it's considered a crisis. It's officially a crisis. That's a time of danger of governments needing government's intervention to somehow get it going again. Benefits of economic growth. So obviously there'd be more, goods and services in the shops. If we look at the pictures, there's one picture we can see of the third world and not so many products, very basic products. Whereas in the first world, we can see on the right, you've got a lot of products. So with economic growth comes, shops being filled up and, lots available, lots of products and services available to buy. You've got increased employment. People are able to work because there's more jobs needs doing. If you've got economic growth, there'll be more demands for products, and so maybe more investment and more people needed. You have a low and stable inflation because we know if you've got more goods, that means the value of money goes up, and so that will bring the prices down. Here we've got the classic increase in supply to S1, and so the price goes down and the quantity to market goes up. There'll be increased tax revenues, people able to pay more into the collective purse, wallet, and then we can have more technology in schools, maybe technological help, medicines in hospitals. People can spend more time with their kids, maybe retire earlier. This is the economic growth means. In the past, it has meant people can spend a long time at university studying and have lots of years as a pensioner not producing and able to enjoy the pensions and hospitals and entertainment available. So economic growth really helps with increased tax revenues, which ends up helping everybody in the end. The big problem with growth is it might not be an equal growth. So it might be just the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Here we see in the photo, we've got people looking quite well off, and then somebody without anything. And this might be the reason for the growth. It doesn't mean everyone's benefiting. So growth can also mean technical progress can replace workers with machines. Here we've got the banks using cash machines, and obviously the clerks are not having a role anymore. People can do lots of bank activity on internet, and then suddenly you don't need bank clerks. Here we've got a shop in the Amazon. This is in America, and basically there's no one. There's no cashiers. There's no people in the shop working there. Maybe just a security guard, just to check that things aren't being damaged or stolen. But there's basically security with cameras and alarms, and you just take what you want, and it's automatically deducted from your bank account. So here we can see, we're really technology is replacing jobs here, so that can be a problem. Doesn't mean you're going in the right direction, having more economic growth. Maybe you're producing more guns, and maybe people are getting very tired. In the bottom corner on the left, we can see someone working so hard, so maybe the economic growth is going up, but she's not seeing her children, maybe, or seeing her husband, and that isn't a positive. Maybe we're spending a lot of money on prisons, keeping people in prisons, and people are spending money on cigarettes. So it doesn't mean that we're going in the right direction. There could be pollution, deforestation, and less biodiversity. Here we can see the difference when we had COVID and when we didn't have COVID. So we got all the pollution when we didn't have COVID, and suddenly after a few months without the pollution, we could see incredible. So we can see obviously that the economic activity really does bring a lot of pollution and problems for people breathing, etc., and for the climate. Yeah, so a population may be working too hard, and relationships break down in that case. If you saw the film Sorry to Have Missed You, we saw someone who's a delivery, self-employed delivery driver, and he just worked and it ruined his family, and he had lots of problems, and in the end, what life is not worth living if you just spend all your time sleeping or looking at the road. So that can be a problem. It's not really that the purpose of life, just to work and just to produce economic growth. So keep things in balance. We do need sustainable growth, which means really creating a green economy. Here we need to reduce the rate we use up natural resources. We need renewable energies, we need to recycle, more efficient production methods, and restrictions to reduce pollution. So mainly we need to use green energy, mainly. But then there's a lot of things like houses we can make more efficient, keeping in the heat and being cool in the winter, and all these other recycling, so to reduce the waste. So yeah, basically measuring output doesn't mean we're going in the right direction. We might be suffering in the forms of sustainability, by producing so much with such a industrial economy. We are actually going to cause a lot of damage in the end, and that will cost a lot of money and a lot of resources. And so there's no equality maybe, and the standard of living, are we working too hard and not actually enjoying life? Yes, and it's important to measure per capita, not just the GDP, but per person, so we can compare in a correct way. Okay. Right. To increase or to have economic growth and have maximum economic growth, we can use the different instruments, policy instruments, the fiscal expansionary policy. Remember, the government here can increase spending and reduce taxation to get more demand in the economy, more money in the economy, and hopefully more aggregate demand, where the economy starts growing and using all the factors of production, all the unemployed. Or monetary expansionary policy, so increasing the supply of money by reducing interest rates. The central bank does this one. Or supply side policies, improving education, subsidising, new technologies, investing into new technologies and new explorations for oil or something, or natural resources. Or we have the exchange rate policy, which means, again, we we reduce the interest rate and make our currency cheaper, and so we can sell abroad and increase the demand for our products abroad. This is called devaluing the currency. So those are the policies that a government can use to obtain this economic growth.